The human body consists of hundreds of the muscles which are present in different shapes and sizes. Each muscle has particular structures that enable it to perform a specific functions. The muscles are attached to bones or other tissues to help us maintain position, perform movements, and even protect our organs. Muscle tissue is made up of contractile cells that are called muscle fibers. Muscle tissue can be grouped into three types: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscles. Skeletal muscles connect to the skeleton and other structures like the eyes to help with movements and stability of the body. These muscles are voluntary, it means we have active control of them to perform movements like flexing your elbow. Cardiac muscle is the muscle tissue that make up the wall of the heart. These muscles contract in a rhythmic way to pump blood to the whole body, and they are involuntary. It means that we cannot consciously control this type of the muscle. At last we have smooth muscles, which mainly lies in the walls of the blood vessels and hollow organs. In blood vessels, smooth muscles helps to contract the vessel's wall to change their diameter, which helps to control blood flow. In hollow organs, smooth muscles perform rhythmic contractions called peristaltic contractions, which moves the content of these organs in one direction, like food in the stomach or intestine. Smooth muscle is also under involuntary control, and muscles are present in variety of shapes that helps to perform their specific functions. For example, a flat muscle has a parallel fiber and often has a flat sheet like tendon called aponeurosis, as is this case for the external oblique muscle covering the abdomen. Next is quadrate muscle, which describe a square muscle with four equal sides. An example of a quadrate muscle is the famous six-pack, anatomically called rectus abdominis, which is a long paired muscle that is divided into square-like proportions by bands of the connective tissues. Pennate muscles, on the other hand, have their fibers attaching obliquely to a tendon. These muscles can be grouped into unipennate, bipennate, or multipennate muscles depending on the relationship between the muscles fascicles and the tendons. Unipennate muscle fibers go in one direction and merge on one side of its tendon, like the extensor digitorum longus muscle in the leg. Bipennate muscles look like a feather, having oblique fibers on both sides of the tendon like the rectus femoris of the interior thigh. And the multipennate muscles have fascicles in different directions attaching to a branched central tendon like the deltoid muscle covering the shoulder. Next are fusiform muscles, which have thick muscles belly that become tapered at both ends. An example of fusiform muscles would be the biceps brachii. Speaking of biceps brachii, multi-headed or multi-bellied muscles have more than one head of the attachment or more than one contractile belly. Both the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii have two and three fusiform heads respectively, and thus could also be referred to a multi-headed. Example of multi-bellied muscles include the gastrocnemius muscle in the leg or digastric muscle under the jaw, which both have two bellies. Next are the convergent muscles, which are large muscles that arise from multiple points but their fibers converge to insert into a single point. A good example is the pectoralis, major muscles of the anterior chest wall. This muscle arises from the sternum rib and clavicle but insert into a single spot on the humerus. Lastly, there are circular or sphincteral muscles, which are indeed shaped like a circle. Typically, these muscles surrounded a body opening, and their circular shape causes constrictions of opening during the contraction. For example, orbicularis oris surrounds the mouth, and when contracted, it helps constrict the oral opening seen when puckering your lips when whistling. Muscles attached to different body parts including bones, cartilage, skins, or even other muscles. For example, Many facial muscles attach to the skin of the face, which allows facial muscles to move the skin of the face to produce facial expressions like smiling. Now, every muscle arises from the point called the origin and insert into a point called the insertion. Typically, the origin is proximal, meaning that it is the closer to the trunk of the body. Also, typically, the origin does not move, meaning that it stays fixed. When the muscle contracts, on the other hand, the insertion is distal, meaning that it is further away from the trunk. Also, the insertion point is movable, meaning that it gets pulled towards the origin to produce a movement. However, this is not always the case. Depending on which end of the muscle is fixed, some muscles can act in both directions, which means proximal attachment is sometimes the movable end of the muscle. That's why some sources may prefer using the term proximal and distal attachments instead of origin and insertions. When describing the muscles points to the attachments, in some cases the term medial and lateral may be used instead to illustrate the proximity of the attachment to the midline of the body. Medial meaning closer to the midline and lateral meaning further away. Now, understanding the attachments of the muscle is important in understanding the action a particular muscle may have. For example, the medial and lateral head of the triceps brachii originates on the posterior aspects of the humerus and insert on the olecranon process of the ulna, meaning they cross the elbow posteriorly. So when they contract, the muscle's belly is shortened to pull the insertions or distal attachments towards the origin or proximal attachments, which in this case produce extensions of the elbow joint. Okay, let's talk about muscles functions. The functions of each muscle can be described using terms like prime mover or agonist, synergist, and antagonist. The primer mover, also called the agonist, is the muscles that provide the major force for producing a particular movement. This agonist often has a synergist, which is another muscle that helps the agonist directly or indirectly. Direct support means that the synergist performs the same movement as the agonist, but in a weaker manner. In indirect support, the synergist acts as a fixator, making sure that the proximal parts of the limb are fixed in place, which leaves the distal actions free to move. In some cases, an agonist may have several synergists helping it out to make sure the right movement is executed. Now, like a good story, every agonist has an antagonist which opposes the actions of an agonist. Let's walk through an example. To perform flexion of the elbow joint, three arm muscles have to collaborate: the brachialis in the anterior arm, the biceps brachii muscle which lies superficial to it, and triceps muscle, triceps brachii, in the posterior part of the arm. The brachialis is our agonist or prime mover since it shortens as it contracts and provides the majority of the force involved in the flexing the forearm toward the arm. The biceps brachii is an important synergist, aiding significantly in this movement, and the triceps brachii on the posterior arm is the antagonist that helps coordinate and control the flexion by slowly relaxing as brachialis contract. And finally, the deltoid is an example of fixator as it stabilizes the humerus as a brachialis contract. Okay, now let's finish up by taking about tendons, which are the tough fibrous bands that connect the muscles to the bone. Their main function is to transmit the force produced by the muscle contraction into the bone they attach to, which allows for joint movement. A good example is calcaneal or Achilles tendon, a common tendon for both the gastrocnemius and soleus muscles at the back of the leg, inserting onto the calcaneus or heel bone. Tendons can also play a positional role, meaning that they can fix part of the body in a certain position like fingers when writing.